Have you noticed how even when you do everything right spiritually, your financial life seems stuck? You meditate, you pray, you serve, you give your heart. Yet at the end of the month, you still feel afraid to open your bank statement. That pain is not lack of faith. It's an invisible poison. For centuries, women have been taught to believe that prosperity was a sin, that wealth pulled them away from purity. The lie was repeated so often it became almost truth. Feminine spirituality, poverty plus guilt. But that equation was never real. It was a prison built to keep feminine power submissive. Today, you're going to discover that this guilt was never born within you. It's a program implanted in the collective quantum field, transmitted from generation to generation, and more. I'll show you how it distorts your brain, your body, and even your vibration in the universe. Get ready, because once we expose this quantum lie, you'll see that prosperity is not only possible for spiritual women, it's an essential part of your mission. The great quantum lie was never innocent. It was woven into the invisible fabric of feminine spirituality to make women believe that poverty is the same as purity. It sounds poetic, but in reality, it's a vibrational prison. This lie does not live in logic. It inhabits the subtle field where beliefs and emotions determine how reality manifests. Many women wake up with this weight in their chest. The desire to prosper clashes with the silent voice that whispers, "This isn't spiritual." It's as if every dream came with a hidden reminder of guilt. Life then splits between faith and scarcity, between devotion and frustration, without realizing it's not personal failure, but an invisible program. This program works like a quantum virus, unseen. It installs itself, alters inner codes, and distorts the frequency of abundance. The outcome is predictable: self-sabotage, fear of asking for more, and the sense that the universe punishes those who dare to expand. It's such an ancient lie that it feels natural, yet it remains a lie. Picture a woman who serves her community with love, helps others heal, yet struggles to pay her own bills. She begins to believe that wanting stability is somehow wrong. This paradox creates hidden shame. How can she dedicate her life to spirit and still lack the basics? The discomfort grows when she sees spiritual men accumulating wealth without guilt. They write books, lead temples, and live in abundance. Meanwhile, spiritual women are conditioned to stay quiet and accept less. This contrast reveals that the lie is not within spirituality itself, but in the distortion around it. The cruelest part is that this lie is not just about money. It hijacks the feminine creative energy, making many stop dreaming big. The body, a natural source of abundance, is treated as an enemy. Pleasure is demonized, intuition silenced, desire censored. And so, abundance stops flowing. But here's the truth: no lie lasts forever. In every generation, some women begin to see the cracks in this system. They realize that prosperity is not a sin, it's a spiritual revolution. And within this awakening lies the key to freedom. And it is exactly this key we must now turn. Because until this quantum lie is exposed, millions of women will remain trapped in the same dilemma: spirituality or abundance. The question is, who planted this belief? And the answer takes us straight into the next point. There is a silent guilt that follows many spiritual women, the fear that desiring prosperity makes them less pure. It's as if the pursuit of money were a hidden sin, a shortcut to losing one's essence. This conflict leads to a life of restraint, as if ambition itself were proof of selfishness. This sacred guilt creates a cruel dilemma: holiness or wealth. For many, the choice seems obvious: give up comfort to keep a clean conscience. Yet this reasoning is a trap. Who decided that spirituality and prosperity are opposites? This belief was planted to neutralize feminine creative power. The effect is devastating. Brilliant women with rare spiritual gifts end up shrinking their own dreams. They work tirelessly to serve, yet secretly punish themselves when they desire more than the minimum. Guilt becomes an invisible leash, pulling them back every time they dare to expand. Picture the woman who refuses a career opportunity because that's not spiritual. Or the healer who charges too little for her work, believing service only has value when it's a sacrifice. These choices seem noble, but they hide self-sabotage passed down through generations. Psychologically, sacred guilt acts like a survival conditioning. The mind associates the desire to prosper with the risk of rejection, exclusion, or even divine punishment. Thus, the woman unconsciously chooses poverty as a safe refuge, even if it drains her and frustrates her in silence. The body feels this weight too. Every thought of "I don't deserve" triggers stress responses in the nervous system. It's as if the organism itself collaborates to sustain scarcity. Abundance, which should be natural, begins to feel like a threat, an emotional prison with invisible bars. But every prison has a crack. Many have begun to see that the guilt is not theirs. It's an inherited program. When a woman dares to desire without shame, she opens the way for others. That simple act, claiming that prosperity is also spiritual, breaks centuries of silence. And so comes the inevitable question: if this guilt didn't begin with you, where did it come from? The answer takes us back to the past, to memories inscribed not only in the mind, but also in the body, and even in the DNA. The guilt that so many women carry was not born within them. It was inherited as a distant echo, transmitted from generation to generation. Wars, religious persecution, and centuries of female repression left marks not only in stories told, but also in the body. Science now confirms traumatic experiences can be written into DNA and passed down to descendants. So when a woman feels fear or shame for desiring prosperity, it's not just her inner voice speaking. It's the voice of ancestors who were punished for standing out, burned for exercising power, or silenced for daring to dream. This collective memory still pulses today, shaping choices that seem individual but are deeply inherited. Picture the great-grandmother who lost everything because of war, or the ancestor persecuted for practicing spiritual knowledge. These stories, even when not consciously remembered, remain alive in the bodies of their descendants. The result? An unconscious drive to hide, to avoid attention, to equate safety with scarcity. Epigenetics explains that genes can be switched on or off depending on environment and experience. This means that old traumas shape present reactions. If an entire generation was conditioned to believe that wealth brought danger, that belief can resurface centuries later, like an alarm going off without any real threat. This inner alarm shows up in subtle ways. A woman may feel uncomfortable talking about money or guilty when receiving unexpected prosperity. She doesn't realize she's reacting to memories that aren't hers, but belong to a collective feminine experience. It's like carrying scars from a war never fought. But if pain is inherited, healing can be too. When a woman consciously chooses to reprogram her relationship with abundance, she heals not only herself, but also her ancestors and descendants. Each new pattern creates space for future generations to grow free from the same vibrational prison. Practical examples appear in rituals of reconnection with lineage. Some women write letters of gratitude to their ancestors, releasing the pain that no longer belongs to them. Others use therapeutic practices like family constellations or guided meditations to rewrite the energetic contract with the past. Small choices with immense impact. And this is where the subject becomes even deeper. If guilt is inherited, how can one break free from it for good? The answer takes us beyond genetics into the cultural narratives that cemented the conflict between spirituality and prosperity. For centuries, the patriarchal narrative reinforced the idea that spirituality and prosperity could not walk hand in hand. Women were taught to believe that the poorer they were, the holier they would become. This belief infiltrated traditions, religious discourse, and even the collective unconscious, creating an artificial divide between matter and spirit. Meanwhile, history reveals a striking contradiction. Spiritual men always had access to wealth and prestige without guilt. Monks were supported by donations, priests lived in luxurious temples, spiritual leaders accumulated lands and treasures. But for women, desiring the same was labeled as sin or arrogance. This conflict carved a deep wound into the feminine. The spiritual woman began to believe she had to choose between serving the soul or caring for the body, between helping others or allowing herself comfort. This false choice created centuries of frustration, as if abundance were a male privilege and renunciation a female destiny. Examples of this are still alive today. How many healers, yoga teachers, or spiritual guides charge very low fees for their services? Many believe that asking for fair exchange dishonors their mission, as if charging properly were to profane something sacred. In reality, this only perpetuates the same vibrational prison. This dilemma is not only economic, it is energetic. By separating spirituality from prosperity, a woman splits her essence in two. Her heart longs to serve, but her mind fears judgment. This inner division creates incoherence, limiting both abundance and the spiritual impact of her work. The truth is that prosperity is not the enemy of spirituality. It is its extension. When a woman allows herself to prosper, she expands her capacity to serve. With more resources, she can invest in projects, support communities, and multiply impact. Money becomes an ally, not a rival, to her spiritual mission. But breaking free from this conflict takes courage to challenge centuries of conditioning. It means recognizing that this opposition was never natural, but fabricated. Like removing the mask of an illusion. Suddenly one sees that abundance and spirituality have always been two faces of the same energy. And by looking back at the history of feminine spirituality, we can understand how this distorted narrative was built. Because before patriarchy, spiritual women did not just prosper, they were revered for it. Before patriarchy, spiritual women were not only acknowledged, but revered. Priestesses in Sumer, Egypt, and Delphi held positions of prestige, led temples, and guarded sacred knowledge. They combined spiritual power with material prosperity without guilt or conflict. This fusion was seen as natural and necessary for social harmony. These women were oracles, healers, advisors to kings and queens. They received offerings, owned land, and influenced political decisions. Prosperity was part of their role, not a contradiction. Their abundance reflected respect for feminine energy as a source of life and wisdom. To prosper was a sign of blessing, not of sin. With the rise of patriarchy, this history was rewritten. The image of the prosperous spiritual woman became dangerous. Female wealth was treated with suspicion. If a priestess owned land or held influence, she was quickly associated with lust, witchcraft, or sin. Prosperity stopped being honor and became threat. This was not accidental, but strategic. Diminishing the spiritual and economic authority of women was essential for consolidating male power. The collective imagination was reshaped. Spiritual women should be poor, discreet, and submissive. Any sign of female prosperity was interpreted as corruption or heresy. A clear example lies in the Inquisition, where healers and midwives were persecuted and burned. Many of them held local prosperity and community influence. The official discourse attacked them not only for witchcraft, but also for their material and spiritual autonomy. Prosperity in that context became a crime. This distortion left deep scars. Even today, when a spiritual woman prospers, she feels society's suspicious gaze, as if female abundance were always proof of selfishness or manipulation. The historical weight of this narrative still echoes in everyday judgments, both from men and from other women. But it is essential to recover the original memory. There was a time when feminine spirituality blossomed together with abundance. Women were seen as divine channels of prosperity. This historical rescue is an act of healing, showing that scarcity was never the natural destiny of spiritual women, but a cultural imposition. And once we understand this distortion, we also understand the collective trauma that came with it. The trauma that taught women to hide their gifts, dim their light, and believe it was safer to be invisible than prosperous. And that leads us directly into the next point. Feminine collective trauma was not born from a single wound, but from centuries of accumulated repression. During the Inquisition, millions of women were persecuted, accused of witchcraft, tortured, and burned alive. Many were midwives, healers, and spiritual leaders, guardians of ancestral knowledge that united prosperity and spirituality. This massacre left deep scars in the collective unconscious. These deaths affected not only bodies, but also the vibrational field of generations to come. Every woman learned, even without words, that standing out was dangerous, that prosperity could cost her life. Thus, the pattern was born. It is safer to be poor, invisible, and submissive than rich, prosperous, and suspect. This inheritance still echoes. The cultural impact was devastating. Entire communities lost their female leaders and sources of wisdom. The memory of strong women was replaced by images of sinners and witches. Society learned to fear the woman who prospered spiritually, and women learned to fear themselves. This collective trauma also shaped everyday behaviors. Even today, many women lower their voices in meetings, avoid speaking about money, or hide their achievements to avoid envy. It's as if a ghost whispers, "Don't stand out too much, or you'll be punished." This is the legacy of cultural repression. Psychologically, this collective fear generates hyper-vigilant responses. The body remains on constant alert, as if danger were always near. Chronic stress becomes part of life, draining creative energy. Prosperity begins to feel like a risk rather than a natural right. But the truth is, this trauma no longer belongs to this generation. It can be acknowledged, honored, and released. Every time a woman chooses to take up space, charge fairly for her work, or affirm her worth, she breaks an invisible chain. Healing begins in the act of allowing oneself to flourish. Practical examples of liberation are already unfolding. Women turning their spiritual gifts into prosperous ventures, leaders uniting faith and abundance without guilt, healers charging fairly for their services. Each of them rewrites history and heals not only themselves, but the entire feminine collective. And it is precisely this cycle of pain and repetition that explains the prison of guilt in the present. Because every time a woman feels desire followed by guilt, she is reliving this ancestral trauma. And that leads us directly into the next point. Inherited trauma manifests today as a silent, destructive cycle. Desire, guilt, self-sabotage, poverty. Many women still live trapped in this invisible machinery. When the impulse to prosper arises, guilt immediately follows, draining energy and blocking progress. It's as if there were an inner judge ready to condemn every step. This cycle can be compared to a leaking cup. No matter how much wine is poured in, it never stays. The same happens with prosperity. Even when a woman receives opportunities, clients, or resources, something always slips away. Guilt acts like an invisible crack, preventing abundance from remaining. In practice, this shows up in everyday situations. The woman who gets a raise and quickly spends it all compulsively. The healer who attracts clients but then falls ill and stops working. The entrepreneur who earns money but feels ashamed to invest in herself. Different expressions of the same pattern, not feeling worthy. The body reacts as an accomplice in this process. Every "I don't deserve" thought releases stress hormones that sabotage clarity and decision-making. The woman feels constant fatigue, procrastinates, and self-sabotages without realizing it. The prison of guilt has no physical bars, yet it imprisons with the same effectiveness. This prison also shapes relationships. Many avoid talking about money with partners or friends, fearing judgment. Others hide their achievements so as not to seem arrogant. This silence reinforces the pattern of invisibility, creating the illusion that female prosperity must be hidden to be accepted. But the cruelest part is that this prison feels natural, as if it were part of personality or destiny. The woman believes she was not born to prosper, that abundance is someone else's privilege. This belief infiltrates every choice, from the prices she charges to the way she positions herself in the world. On the other hand, noticing the pattern is already the first step to breaking it. Naming the prison is like turning on the light in a dark room. Suddenly, the chains become visible, and once seen, they can be dissolved. Awareness is the key that unlocks the door to freedom, and that awareness leads us to a fascinating field: how neuroscience explains financial guilt and the direct impact it has on the female brain. Because understanding the prison is not enough, we must grasp the mechanisms that keep it alive. Science has shown that thinking about money is not a neutral act. For many spiritual women, simply imagining prosperity activates fear-related regions in the brain, such as the amygdala. This means the body reacts to the idea of abundance as if it were a threat. What should generate pleasure and motivation instead creates stress and withdrawal. This conditioning was not born by chance, but from centuries of negative associations. The feminine mind learned to link prosperity with danger, persecution, judgment, exclusion. So when the desire to prosper arises, the brain fires warning signals, as if saying, "Careful, this could destroy you." Financial guilt has a neurological foundation. Studies in neuroscience applied to psychology show that repeating scarcity thoughts strengthens specific brain connections. It's like reinforcing a trail in a forest. The more it's walked, the easier it becomes to follow again. The same happens with guilt. Every time it is experienced, it becomes more automatic. In practice, this explains why so many women feel uncomfortable talking about money. The heart races, breathing shortens, the mind freezes. It's not just emotion, it's a physiological response. The brain, conditioned by the past, reacts as if prosperity were a real danger. Feminine spirituality gets stuck in a biochemical conflict. But the same science that reveals this conditioning also points to the way out. Thanks to neuroplasticity, the brain can be rewired. New narratives and intentional practices create different pathways. What once triggered fear can begin to trigger pleasure. Prosperity stops being a threat and becomes a positive stimulus. Simple examples already show this effect. Visualization practices, affirmations, and gratitude exercises reshape brain patterns. A woman who, instead of thinking, "I don't deserve to charge," affirms daily, "My work transforms lives and deserves to be valued," begins to build new neural connections. Over time, this shifts her vibration. This process is not instant, but it is powerful. The brain needs conscious repetition to replace old pathways. It's like replacing a dirt road with a highway. It takes effort at first, but then the flow becomes faster and more natural. Guilt can be reprogrammed into confidence. And it is precisely by understanding this reprogramming that we enter an even deeper territory. How emotional frequency itself influences the quantum field, distorting or amplifying the material reality of each woman. If neuroscience shows how guilt shapes the brain, quantum physics reveals how emotion affects the field of possibilities. The universe doesn't just respond to what we think, but mainly to what we feel. Low emotional frequencies like guilt and fear contract the vibrational field, attracting experiences of scarcity and limitation. It's as if every emotion were a password to the quantum field. When a woman vibrates guilt, she sends out a blocking code that prevents abundance from materializing. On the other hand, when she vibrates confidence and gratitude, she opens portals of synchronicity that connect her reality to new opportunities. Emotion is the language of the universe. The problem is that many spiritual women still operate with the wrong password. They pray for prosperity but vibrate fear. They ask for abundance but carry shame. The field doesn't distinguish words, only frequencies. And so, it faithfully responds to what is being emitted, not to what is consciously desired. This distortion was not born from authentic spirituality, but from the patriarchal lie. For centuries, Conditioning taught that matter and spirit were opposites. Women were led to believe that prosperity distanced them from purity. This belief created a collective vibration of scarcity, perpetuated until today. But true spirituality never separated matter from spirit. In ancient traditions, abundance was seen as a reflection of inner harmony. The issue is not wealth, but intention. Conscious prosperity is the natural expansion of spirit. The patriarchal lie distorted this truth, planting guilt where there should be celebration. In practice, this means many spiritual women live in vibrational incoherence. On the mental level, they desire prosperity. On the emotional level, they emit fear. This incoherence blocks the quantum flow, like an antenna out of tune. The result is a cycle of frustration where nothing seems to flow as it should. The way out begins with awareness of one's own frequency. When a woman realizes she doesn't have to choose between spirituality and prosperity, her vibration changes. She starts to emit confidence, and the field responds with coherent abundance. What once seemed impossible begins to manifest naturally. And it is precisely here that the science of reprogramming enters as the key. Because if vibration can be distorted, it can also be recalibrated. The brain and the field respond to new stimuli, and that is the subject of our next step. If guilt shapes the brain and distorts the quantum field, the good news is that it can be reprogrammed. Neuroplasticity shows that the brain is not fixed. It reshapes itself as we repeat new thoughts, emotions, and actions. Likewise, the field responds to the frequency we emit. Reprogramming is the alignment of mind and vibration. Science has already proven that just a few minutes of conscious practice can alter neurological patterns. Gratitude meditations, affirmations, and visualizations activate brain areas linked to pleasure and confidence. What once triggered stress begins to generate calm. The brain learns to associate prosperity with safety, not threat. This process is like changing software. If the old program said, "Prosperity is dangerous," the new one installs the belief, "Prosperity is natural and safe." Each repetition strengthens this new code, making it faster and more automatic. The brain literally builds new internal highways, changing how reality is perceived. Practical examples confirm this. A woman who daily writes 3 things she is grateful for activates circuits of well-being that reduce the weight of guilt. Another who practices abundance visualizations creates emotional familiarity with the desired future. Slowly, prosperity stops being fantasy and becomes a present sensation. But it's not only mental. The body also responds to reprogramming. Breathing practices, body movements, and heart coherence techniques shift the biochemical state in minutes. The heart and brain enter harmony, emitting a coherent frequency that the quantum field recognizes as an invitation to manifest new experiences. The secret lies in repetition. The brain needs consistency to consolidate new connections. It's not enough to practice once. It must become a habit. The more times the new narrative is repeated, the stronger it becomes, until it fully replaces the old one. The mind becomes an ally of abundance. It's important to understand that reprogramming doesn't mean denying pain or inherited history. It means honoring it while choosing a new path. Just as a gardener removes weeds to plant new seeds, a woman clears old patterns to cultivate abundance. It's science applied to daily life. And this transformation sets the stage for something even deeper. How even hormones and neurotransmitters change when we think about prosperity with guilt or with pleasure. Thinking about money is not just a mental act. It is a biochemical experience. Studies show that when a woman associates wealth with guilt, her body releases cortisol, the stress hormone. This creates muscle tension, anxiety, and a sense of threat. Prosperity in this state stops being a source of pleasure and becomes a trigger for suffering. On the other hand, when the relationship with money is healthy, the body releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to motivation and pleasure. Enthusiasm, clarity, and willingness to act arise. The same image of prosperity that once provoked fear now inspires courage. The body confirms that abundance can be safe and empowering. Another key hormone in this process is oxytocin, known as the bonding hormone. When prosperity is lived with guilt, oxytocin levels drop, making healthy connections and belonging harder. But when prosperity is experienced as an expression of purpose, oxytocin rises, expanding empathy and generosity. This biochemical impact helps explain why prosperous women tend to be happier and more influential. Their bodies work in favor of abundance, not against it. Prosperity is not just a financial matter, but a physiological state that sustains clarity, energy, and capacity to serve. Practical examples make this clear. The healer who learns to charge with confidence feels relief instead of guilt, and that relief fuels more vitality to serve. The spiritual entrepreneur who celebrates her earnings releases dopamine, becoming even more creative. The body responds to money the same way it responds to affection. This dismantles the myth that prosperity corrupts. What corrupts is the guilt attached to it. Money itself is neutral. The biochemical effect depends on the meaning we give it. When linked to scarcity, it produces stress. When linked to purpose, it produces expansion. Modern science confirms what ancient traditions already knew. Body, mind, and spirit are inseparable. The way we think and feel about money directly influences our health and our energetic field. Conscious prosperity, therefore, is medicine for both body and soul. And it is precisely this awareness that brings us to one of the greatest myths. The belief that feminine goodness is only true when there is sacrifice. A myth that still imprisons many spiritual women today. One of the most deeply rooted myths in feminine spirituality is the idea that being good means living in sacrifice. Many women believe that giving, until exhaustion proves purity, while caring for themselves or prospering would signal selfishness. This myth distorts the feminine essence, which is naturally creative, nurturing, and expansive. This pattern shows up in common attitudes. The healer who works for free until burnout. The mother who erases herself for her children. The woman who only feels valuable when carrying others' burdens. As if goodness were measured by endured pain. But this is not virtue. It is inherited conditioning that drains vital energy. The myth of sacrificial goodness turns spirituality into martyrdom. It makes women believe that the more they suffer, the more worthy they become. This cycle creates not only physical exhaustion, but also silent resentment. Creative energy, which could generate abundance and impact, is consumed by the belief that serving means suffering. Psychologically, this myth reinforces the belief that feminine worth lies in being useful, rather than being whole. A woman measures herself by how much she gives to others, not by how much she flourishes within herself. The result is an inner emptiness. The more she gives, the less she feels worthy to receive. A vicious circle of giving without nourishment. But the truth is that goodness does not require sacrifice. True goodness is born from overflow, not exhaustion. A woman who cares for herself, prospers, and honors her own boundaries can give more to the world, and with greater quality. Serving from fullness means serving in alignment with her essence, not against it. Practical examples prove this. The healer who values her work attracts more committed clients. The mother who cares for herself inspires her children by example. The spiritual leader who prospers expands projects that transform entire communities. Goodness is not self-erasure. It is flourishing so that the collective can flourish too. The myth of sacrificial goodness must be firmly questioned. It is not spirituality. It is prison. It is not altruism. It is self-abandonment. True service to the world does not come from scarcity, but from abundance. The more a woman blooms, the more she has to offer. Prosperity does not diminish goodness, it amplifies it. And it is precisely this disconnection from the feminine creative essence that leads us to the next point. How the female body, in its biology and energy, was taught to deny pleasure, intuition, and receptivity. The female body is, by nature, a source of creation and abundance. It generates life, nurtures, and renews cycles. Yet for centuries, it has been taught to deny this power. Pleasure, intuition, and receptivity were treated as sins or weaknesses. Women came to believe their bodies were obstacles rather than portals. This disconnection shows up in small daily attitudes. Many women feel guilty for resting, ashamed of experiencing pleasure, fearful of trusting their intuition. What should be natural became suspicious. It's as if a clear spring had been convinced it was a desert. This estrangement from the creative body was no accident. It was culturally imposed as a form of control. The more women were disconnected from their sacred biology, the easier it was to keep them submissive. By denying pleasure and intuition, they lost direct contact with their inner compass of abundance. Psychologically, this generates a life of constant struggle. Instead of flowing with their cycles, women force themselves into masculine patterns of productivity, believing worth comes only from effort and hardness. This disconnection drains creative energy, turning what could be expansion into exhaustion. In practice, this rupture shows up in many areas. The entrepreneur who ignores her body's signals and falls ill. The mother who never allows herself to receive help. The healer who doubts her intuitive perceptions and clings only to logic. In all these situations, the creative feminine is silenced. But when a woman reconnects with her body as a temple, something shifts. By honoring her cycles, respecting her limits, and valuing her pleasure, she releases powerful energy. Her creativity expands, her intuition strengthens, and her prosperity flows. The body stops being a burden and becomes a source again. Practical examples include yoga, somatic meditation, and womb reconnection rituals. These practices not only relax but reawaken body consciousness as a space of wisdom. A woman discovers that abundance does not come from outside, but pulses within her, in every cell. And it is precisely this reconnection that opens the way to the next step. Understanding that prosperous women do not only flourish individually, but become agents of social and spiritual transformation. Current research shows that when a woman prospers, it's not only her life that improves, the entire community around her transforms. World Bank studies reveal that women with financial autonomy invest more in education, health, and collective well-being. Feminine prosperity creates a multiplying effect that goes far beyond the individual. This happens because feminine energy, when free, is naturally oriented toward care and expansion. A prosperous woman doesn't just accumulate for herself, but shares, supports, and inspires. Her abundance is not limited to material goods, but translates into social, cultural, and spiritual impact. To prosper is also to serve on a greater scale. Real-life examples confirm this power. Women who create conscious businesses, healers who prosper and reinvest in community projects, spiritual leaders who use resources to expand their message. Each of them proves that prosperity does not corrupt. On the contrary, it amplifies the positive impact already within them. Psychologically, prosperity strengthens self-esteem and expands horizons. A woman once limited by fear of scarcity begins to believe in her creative capacity. This inner shift awakens courage to take on new roles and raise her voice in the world. Prosperity, in this sense, is fuel for leadership. Culturally, prosperous women break old patterns. They show future generations that spirituality and abundance can walk together. Each achievement paves the way for others to allow themselves to desire more. Prosperity stops being taboo and becomes collective inspiration. This is how the healing of one woman becomes social healing. Spiritually, prosperity expands one's life mission. With more resources, a woman can support causes, invest in her own growth, and serve more powerfully. Money, when aligned with purpose, stops being a villain and becomes a vehicle of transformation. But perhaps the deepest impact is symbolic. When a woman flourishes, she sends a vibrational message to the collective field. It is safe to prosper. This frequency breaks the cycle of guilt, and opens new paths for others. Feminine prosperity is not just individual achievement, it is ancestral liberation. And this brings us to the greater conclusion. The lie that tied feminine spirituality to guilt and poverty was never the truth. Because the more a woman flourishes, the more the whole world prospers with her. The greatest quantum lie was making women believe that spirituality and prosperity could not coexist. This narrative hijacked generations, planted guilt, and turned abundance into taboo. But now, the truth begins to emerge. Feminine spirituality was never meant to equal poverty. It has always been a source of life, creation, and abundance. The more a woman flourishes, the more the world flourishes with her. Her prosperity is not only individual, but collective. She inspires daughters, sisters, friends, and even men to rethink their own paradigms. A prosperous woman is a living portal that breaks ancestral chains and opens space for new stories of freedom. The path of conscious abundance is, in fact, a spiritual mission. To prosper is not to deviate from faith, but to expand it. It is recognizing that serving the world requires resources, energy, and courage. A woman who embraces prosperity as part of her spirituality becomes more whole, more powerful, and more capable of transforming realities. The guilt that once imprisoned can be replaced with confidence. The shame that once limited can be exchanged for gratitude. The fear of judgment dissolves when a woman realizes that prosperity does not pull her away from her essence. It connects her even more deeply to her purpose. It is liberation, not betrayal. Examples of women who have broken this cycle are everywhere. Leaders who created conscious businesses, healers who prospered and expanded their reach, mothers who dared to teach their daughters that wealth and spirituality can walk together. Each story is a reminder that this transformation is not only possible, it is already happening. This new awareness invites us to change the question. It is no longer, can I be spiritual and prosperous? The real question is, how much does the world lose when a spiritual woman chooses to stay small? The answer is clear. It loses light, impact, healing, and transformation. Feminine spirituality was never about erasure. It has always been about blossoming. And blossoming includes abundance, pleasure, expansion, and impact. The more a woman honors her prosperity, the more she honors the life pulsing within and through her. Prosperity is mission, not deviation. It is the path, not the obstacle. And now, the decision stands before every woman to keep repeating the cycle of guilt, or to choose freedom. Because the truth is simple and powerful. The more you flourish, the more the entire universe flourishes with you. And that is the invitation echoing from here on. Now it's time to choose. Will you keep carrying the guilt that was never yours? Or will you finally free yourself from this quantum lie once and for all? Because every time you shrink, the world loses the chance to receive the light only you can bring. Ask yourself, how much longer will you confuse sacrifice with goodness? How much longer will you accept that spirituality and poverty walk hand in hand? The universe doesn't need more exhausted, hidden women. It needs you, whole, prosperous, and confident. Abundance is not a detour from your spiritual path. It's part of it. The more you flourish, the more the world flourishes with you. Your prosperity is a form of collective healing. Breaking free from guilt is more than a personal choice. It's a revolutionary act. So I ask you, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you let it become just another forgotten theory? Or will you begin applying it today, in your prices, your choices, your prayers, and even in the way you look at yourself? If this video brought you clarity, courage, or even the discomfort you needed to feel, leave your comment below. I want to know what you're going to change starting now. And if you believe other women also need to hear this truth, share this video. You might be the channel that awakens freedom in another soul. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because every week I'll bring more content uniting spirituality, abundance, and purpose. Don't walk this path alone. Here you have a space to expand. Remember, the greatest lie was making you believe you had to choose between spirituality and prosperity. The truth is that the universe flourishes with you, and the more you allow yourself to prosper, the more doors of abundance open for all of us.